for the, Brenna is absent and excused. We begin with the land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that, excuse me, that we gather on the ancestral homelands of Coast Salish peoples, specifically Nooksack and Lummi tribes, who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin throughout the San Juan Islands and the North Cascades watershed from time immemorial. On behalf of everyone here, we want to express our deepest respect and gratitude for our Indigenous neighbors, the Nooksack and Lummi tribes, for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. Next up is the.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is approval of agenda. Any changes from our printed agenda? If not, entertain a motion to approve the agenda as written.
Motion to approve the agenda is written.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And then next is public comments. Frank Hartness.
Yeah.
So you're up. You'd like to come to see.
Well, as
Thank you for coming.
thank you for having us. I've never done any board meetings, so I'm not sure.
Well, you're welcome. We generally keep comments to 3 minutes and.
Yeah, that'll be
but
fine.
you-
I don't
and then the
have
only
a
other-
lot to say, and I can get right to the.
Our only other main rules is nothing personal against staff. and
Oh,
things like
nothing
No,
derogatory.
yeah, right. But I'm not expecting,
Totally
I
get
just, that's just.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. So the reason I came was just to present, I'm sure you're all aware of the land that I was proposing to make an offer on, and essentially, it's a piece of land that's contiguous to the school property and owned by the school that had been acquired from Master's family quite some time ago, I guess. And it is basically just overgrown, and our children are living in the property next door to it, which was ours from, I don't know, early 70s, I guess, or so. And we'd like to move back to the area, and it looked like maybe it was an opportunity for a win-win where we could possibly purchase the property. And some of the concerns that I've heard were that, maybe with future expansion of the school, it may hinder that, which, of course, we never know what's going to happen. But right now, the school is currently being underused. If anything, there's, I think, maybe 3 classrooms in the main school that are actually being used for school. So I'm curious about the demographics of how this thing would change much, being as how it's a real rural area, and the room for expansion in that area is limited pretty much. So that was basically what I wanted to get to, was just what I see as, I'm a lifelong resident of the county. Although we don't live here now, we moved, and the kids have taken over our property there. We would like to come back to the area and be around the kids. So that's kind of our presentation here. And we're not looking for a favor. We're capable to pay whatever the current price is. But I think it could be a good thing. And if it were a situation where the property needed to be downsized or something of that nature, that's up for conversation on our part anyway. So that was basically what I just wanted to bring that out so that everybody knew who I was. I'm 3rd generation in the valley, and we're currently working on our 5th and 6th. So we've been in the neighborhood a long time, and we'd like to proceed with it if it works out for the district. And I understand that has to be something that's, I don't know the whole process. So that's really where we're at with it. But we felt like it would be good to come here and present in person, just so you guys get a face to it. So with that,
Well, thanks, we appreciate you coming, and one other thing with information from the audience, we don't get into a board discussion with that. It's
no,
just
I
one
understand
way.
that
So
totally.
I just
I'm not
don't want you to
expecting-
feel like
I'm not
we're,
expecting
yeah.
an answer and
yeah,
or anything like
Right.
that. I just felt like it would be important for me to put it out there in a context that I see.
right.
And so you see where I'm coming from.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
And there's no one else who signed up. So,
Yeah, we may stick around for a little
yeah,
while.
oh, no, you're
See how
very
this
welcome.
operation
You're very welcome to
flows.
stay. So we appreciate that. Okay. Next up is good of the order.
Okay, well, I wanted to start off with, I know, we had gotten some alerts on Monday about a medical emergency that had happened, here at the high school track. And, just want to give a couple updates. One, the gentleman that was involved in that, he's expected to make a recovery. So I know the people that were here on scene at the time were very concerned that he was in more dire straits than that, and perhaps he was, but he is on the mend, and that's good. I was talking with Bridget Rossman earlier today, and she got some feedback from our local EMTs in the sheriff's office, and it sounds like everything worked the way it was supposed to work in terms of, we had a staff member who did CPR and was able to provide CPR until the EMTs got there, and just the response that we had. So even though it was an unfortunate situation, everything went the way it should in those situations. So I don't have a lot more details specifically about what can be shared publicly about the individual, but I understand the family is very grateful for that response as well.
Great.
Homecoming football game is tomorrow. I don't know if you got a chance to see the big green rock that just got a nice new paint job over there. So the kids are really excited for that. Should be a good community event tomorrow. Looking forward to that. The site visits, elementary site visits are planned for tomorrow as well. And so I'll have information ready for you bright and early tomorrow morning when we get together for that. And then another just calendar thing, I don't have confirmation on this, but I've been in contact with Senator Shoemake's office about her coming and possibly doing a visit here to the district this fall. And right now we're potentially looking at November 6th, which is a Thursday. And I'd like to get her talking with our ASB students. I know they have an interest in talking with her. And then that's also the same day as the Acme Veterans Day Assembly. And so that, I thought that would those would be two good events. So if that does end up working out, I'll let the board know. And if any of you want to attend, that would be a good event, I think. And that's all I have for the good of the order.
Thank you. So next up is board discussion, and our discussion, I think I sent an email on the strategic plan. This is, so it's part of a multiple series of discussions. So this is more overview of the process, and then our next iteration discussion will get into more, more detailed work on aspects of it, as well as I think we will have the public process running simultaneously. And so I thought this time will just be an overview of the process, and Jessica, you prepared background for that. So I'd like to have you start out presenting your draft overview.
So the memo that I sent the board, again, is an overview of this draft process. And this was crafted from my own experience from my past school district, but how I saw that process go, in addition to looking at other district strategic plans and just how that goes together. It is worth noting that districts often pay upwards to, as much as $50,000 for this kind of process. And we're gonna attempt to do this in-house. So I do want to say before I get into the details of this, that this is an ambitious timeline, and there, depending on what comes over the next few months, we may need to push it out a little bit further, but this will be what I attempt to accomplish within 1 year. So it's important to note that the purpose of a strategic plan is to give the district clear direction over the next 5 years. And districts often will put together a strategic plan and it looks really pretty, and then they put it on a shelf and nobody really talks about it again. And that's wasted time and money as far as I'm concerned. So what I want to do is make sure that whatever we do come up with, that it actually works for us. We can operationalize it. We have goals that we can measure. We have the plan puts into place actions that when you go into our buildings, you would actually be able to go and see it moving. And we might not hit all of our goals, but at least we can show progress toward those goals in time for the next strategic plan. So the plan that's currently in place, and so this is just printed off of our website. And so this is the plan that was put into place for the 2020 to 2025 school years. That's why we're talking about this now. The goal areas for that plan included teaching and learning, culture of care, communication, finance, facilities and operations, and then community engagement. Part of the work that we're going to do is talk about, are these goal areas we want to keep? Do we want to change any of these? Do we want to look at what works for this, what works for us, and what do we want to change? So that'll be part of the work. What we're doing right now contributes to the first part of that timeline, which is prep and planning. So we need to set the foundation. You as the board set the vision for what we're going to do as a district. And so throughout this plan, you'll see that I tried to separate board actions from district actions, because those will be two distinct ways that we do this work. So in October here, and I would like either our first October board meeting or our second October board meeting, we call that one of those will be a study session. And what we'll do is spend time where the board can talk about how do you want to define the purpose. So when I put the team together, I will be presenting to them what purpose you have, and then what guiding principles do you as the board want us to be thinking about. And then throughout this process, we're going to keep coming back to the board and checking in and seeing, are we on the right track, getting guidance, and then coming back. So it'll be a little bit of a back and forth that way. You can see on the phase 0, prepare the foundation there. I've got a list of possible people that would make up that steering team. The steering team would help make decisions, but the steering team isn't the only voice in this process. We'll be reaching out to hopefully hundreds of people in our community and schools that will help us shape this work. But we don't want it to be too large of a group that's meeting throughout the year, because you get too many people in the room and you have kind of indecision paralysis where nothing gets decided and moved on. But you can see from this that, the superintendent, possibly one board member, if one of you are interested in participating in this, 2 principals from the elementary and secondary level, 2 teachers from the elementary and secondary levels, a classified staff member, someone from the central office, at least 2 students, and then at least 2 parents as well. And so by having that representative group, as we make decisions, if they feel like their constituency, so to speak, isn't being heard from or paid attention to, their job would be to speak up and make sure that we're doing that. So that work would happen in October, and then October to January is when we really start getting input, and there'll be a lot of surveys, a lot of meetings, a lot of seeking information from folks. And I want to thank Russ for reminding me about my design, the design process, because that is a really good way to make sure that we're not solving the wrong problems.
Right.
We need to make sure that as what I think might be needed might be completely different from what everybody else might think. And so by having a clear process for that helps eliminate some misguided work, because if we get to the end and we get a plan that's not really what we need, that again would be a waste of time and money. So October to January again is that information gathering, and then from January to May is where we then take the information that we get and develop themes and goals and start drafting that plan. If everything goes as on schedule, we should have a draft, a plan ready for board approval by the end of June. And then we would spend next summer putting together the implementation plan. On page 4 is kind of just a simple worksheet that I would anticipate us using at one of our October board meetings, where we talk about defining the purpose and establishing guiding principles. And I find it's easier to get some of this work started when there's something there already instead of starting from scratch. And so that trying to give the board some ideas to work with. If you see anything here you don't like, that's the goal, is to change that and come up with something that works best. On page 5, one of the things that I like best about the last strategic planning process that I was involved in was that we had very specific goal statements. We had metrics, we had strategies and accountability and stages of implementation. And so that was how I would hope to structure our new plan as well. So the example that I used there is if we had a goal area around safety and belonging, a specific goal statement could be, we're going to increase the percentage of students who feel a sense of belonging in our schools. The way that we're going to measure that is by using district surveys and the Healthy Youth Survey to increase belonging responses from, I'm just going to make up some numbers, from 58% to 90%. We would decide that as part of the steering committee work. We would then define specific actions and who would be responsible for them. So it's nice to say those things, but how are we actually going to make that happen? So one strategy could be that teachers will authentically welcome and acknowledge students who come into school when they come into school by using a school adopted system. We want to keep it broad enough so that what's happening at Harmony can work for Harmony, and what's happening at the junior high and high school can work at the junior high and high school. School leaders, our principals, will make sure that all staff are available to greet students when they arrive at schools. We're not keeping them in meetings when kids are coming in. And then district leaders, we're going to provide buildings with input and feedback on their school culture and making sure that we are providing them the tools to move through it. So you can see that at each level, the classroom level, the building leadership level, and the district level, we all have responsibilities and we all have accountability. The last strategic plan that I worked on, our goal areas were safety and belonging, early excellence, and that was like the work that we do with preschool through 2nd grade, especially in literacy. Mastery of standards, that applies to all grade levels. And then future ready is about what we're doing for our high school students through making sure they're ready for college, for technical school, or other things that they're going to do. So again, we'll talk about whether or not the 5 goal areas that we have are what we want to keep, or if we want to, I'll be bringing you different examples of what other districts have done as well, so we can take a look at that. And then the last page is, the first part is what Russ had shared with me about the design process for problem solving. And then the bottom part is what I'm more experienced with is the design thinking process, which both of these processes are not, they're not really from the education world, they're from industry. They're from what companies do around the world to find the best answers for their products. And I think we can take that learning and apply it to what we do here at school as well. So that's my overview, and I'll let you guys either ask questions or just kind of talk as a board around what you're wanting to, how you're wanting to see this process go.
And start up the discussion, we're going to kind of go round robin, start with you, Ed.
Sure. So my feeling of the last strategic plan was that it was a really good plan, good, robust plan. I think you pointed out a lot of things. Where we fell down was getting it fully integrated into our ongoing operations. We started to do that this past year with the way our calendar is set up. And I think as you are going out and getting people to participate in that, one of the things that will help generate excitement and interest is confidence that the plan will be integrated into our ongoing operations, and that all that work of a great plan is really going to make a difference. In terms of defining the purpose and establishing guiding principles, if you don't mind me getting in front of that a little bit. Maybe it's business background, but to me, it would be a strategy for increasing enrollment. I think that's going to encapsulate a lot of things that we should be doing anyway. I think enrollment is the reward for great programs, whether it's educational programs or just programs that are preparing students for after high school. And so that's kind of the metric that I'm gonna have in my mind when I'm evaluating that. You know, it's an analysis, so you talked about what the outside world does, right? So, you know, things like through that process is really understanding what's our strength as a school district. Meaning, if a family were to move into Whatcom County from somewhere, they're looking at all the school districts, they could live in any one. What are the things that can attract them about Mount Baker? And we want to leverage those things and maximize those as much as possible to further attract those. And then the flip side is, what are our weaknesses, right? What are the things that people might be hesitant or worried about? Not that we can eliminate those, but we want to minimize the impact that has on our enrollment, right? Yeah, so that's kind of it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Ed has a lot of good points. We're definitely gonna wanna stay with goals we can meet, because there's nothing worse than that. I think a lot of our goals were good and were able to be met. I think some we just kind of fell away from or just didn't go back to, and I think we need to stay with the plan, which this is gonna help us. I do like the survey for the community involvement. I think the small team's great, but we've seen with surveys the last little bit that we get a lot of feedback on those. So I think that's gonna benefit us a lot. I believe what I heard before was the way when it was done last time, there was a pretty big community group that was involved. And I don't necessarily, I think a survey is better than that as far as getting action and things done. So I like that idea. We use a strategic plan at work a lot, obviously, and it works really well for your thought process moving forward. And I'm excited to do this. It'll be my first one doing, so it's a learning curve. So I'm excited for it.
I really liked Ed's comments about what are our strengths and areas of weakness as a district, thinking about how enrollment is a reward for good work around that. Like how to frame that. And I think that if we get clear about our strengths and weaknesses, that is going to help us define even more our sense of purpose and guiding principles. But I like this list that you started us off with. And I found myself, you know, the teacher who was like, oh, let it get in here, play with the words. And I think I would want to add to these categories some more student-centered language. And I have some ideas about that, but I don't know if right now is the time to get into those weeds. But I would love to see this language maybe foreground students a little bit more. I mean, they're sort of implied in all of what we do, but bringing that out. Hold on here. I was also really happy with the draft plan, how you gave us the grid of examples of the goal statement, the metrics, the accountability, right? Like if our strategic plan isn't measurable, it doesn't matter how good it sounds, then we can't use it to track our progress, right? And so the way that we write our goal statements is really important. And I hope that our steering committee will have some training around how to write measurable goal statements. I say that coming from a background of having had a lot of training myself in how to write measurable course outcome statements, right? Students will be able to do X, Y, or Z. You can't put too many things in one statement because you can only measure one thing at a time, right? So there's certain things you need to keep in mind when you're crafting these kind of statements so that when you go to use them in the ongoing sort of wovenness that you were talking about, Ed, that they're actually usable statements and not something that now we're stuck with and wish we could revise, and maybe we could if we need to. I love tying in the metrics more, right? Because that helps us see in a really concrete way, this is how far we're hoping to get. And I think I would want to say really clearly as a board for any of our staff who might watch this, the way that I think about that is it's a target. It's what we're aiming for. If we fall short, that doesn't mean we failed. It means we need to take a look at how we can adjust and keep moving forward toward that target. And we can't be afraid to look at those numbers and the gaps between what we hoped we would get to and maybe where we actually are. We can't be afraid of that. It's not a source of shame, it's a source of feedback, right? Just like when we grade students, it's a source of feedback. We're not trying to shame students, we're helping them see where they're doing well and where they need to adjust. And so one of the things that I would really want to say about our strategic planning process and the guidance that we give as a board is that we're modeling a growth mindset with that strategic plan to our students. The way that we use it is showing students how we as educators and leaders in this district are using feedback and self-grading as a way to improve what we do, to learn ourselves how we can be better at all of our jobs and positions in the district. And that if we're open to that feedback that we give ourselves, we can keep learning and growing just like we ask our students to. And so I hope that we can frame it in a positive light opposed to a punitive light.
Yeah, especially around the discussion around the test scores, which I know we're gonna talk about later, right? Like, we've got room for improvement, and it's not to say, to point the finger and make people feel bad, it's just to say, like, let's work on incrementally improving that over time, and hopefully that could, you know, be a source of enrollment, right? And people are looking at things and figuring out where.
And it's also about our wider accountability as an institution that's supported by public tax dollars. We have to show what we're creating. We have to show what we've been able to do with that public trust that we've been given. And being in an educational background myself, it can get easy to get swept up into conversations about really great theories and ideas about learning and what's best for students. And that part feels really good. But you've got to keep tying it back to the data and the numbers to measure it, to see if it's actually working, not just in theory, but in practice. And so I'm excited that the board, that we're integrating sort of our work to be in alignment with the strategic plan so that we're encouraging that self-reflection and checking, and we're modeling that, and that it can happen throughout the district. I have a lot to say,
Yeah, good.
but I can pause there for now.
Well, yeah, thank you. Yeah, for me, I think, you know, I brought up the design process for problem solving, which is something I've used since I learned this in architectural design class in college. So I've used it to talk customers through the process of understanding their own project. And more than once I've saved customers $50,000 or $100,000, which is less work for me, but less expense for them, just by, you know, defining the problem. And I think defining the problem is really the most the most critical part of the process, because once you've defined the problem and you've all decided that's the problem, or problems in the case of a multiple, you know, in this case it's multiple areas that we're going, so it's more than one problem we're trying to solve. If we're all trying to solve the same problem, then the pathway forward falls into place, more likely. But if you're each trying to solve different problems, you can't get anywhere. And so I think that's that part of, and for me, I think, you know, your timeline is great. I think we have to make sure that in that timeline, we really spend maybe a disproportionate amount of time on understanding what it is what are the key areas that we need to strategically improve on. And for me, I think your measurement of enrollment is a really good starting point. For me, a strong academic achievement component, it's got to be in there, because I've watched where we are, you know, and the difficulties of still trying to come out of the pandemic, learning loss, and so, but those are sort of not fully developed in terms of what in particular we need to work on academically. So I think being able to hone in on what we need to work on and then go from there to, so what are gonna be the most useful directions to take in our strategic plan for that. And the other thing I wanted to bring up, in the design process, so it starts by accepting the problem, but it's a circular process so that you get to the very end of the design process and you evaluate. And when you evaluate whether your solution worked, you go back to step one. Because oftentimes you didn't quite get there. And that's what strategic plan is. We do the 5-year chunks. And so at the end of this 2020 to 2025, I think is a good time for us to start by evaluating our last 5 years and say, okay, what did we intend to do? And what worked, what didn't work, and why? So that, because I think if you understand what you succeeded at and what you didn't, you get a better idea of what's going to be practical. And I think the plan has to be challenging but achievable. So it's got to be just, it's got to be within reach, but you have to reach for it, is what I'm thinking. So I think I was going to suggest that our next time that the board spends time, in our October meeting discussing it, we start with a look backwards so that we can use that as a foundation to then move forward. And I think, all of us have had some time with that strategic plan. I started long before we made it, so I've had the whole time, but I think starting with that would be good. And then the other thing in soliciting feedback from the public, I think we need to put together some background prior to that, so that I don't think it's as useful to just hit people cold and say, what do you want us to do? And because I think by framing at least some of the, whether it's academic data or some of the issues that sort of are rising to the top, I think people have more to work with in terms of, well, that one I think is really important. That one, well, it's not as critical to me as whether it's academics or whatever. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But I really appreciate your work in this framework, Jessica. And I think that I think the flow of the work really makes a lot of sense. By having this process framework figured out in advance, I think we can fit the pieces together much easier. So I think this is and then working away at the individual components there.
It seems like a good framework for the process.
I am a little concerned about the timing. So, I mean, like, for example, if there happened to be some big HR issue or something this fall that, dominated a lot of my time, that would take away from this. So I'm gonna be really careful with how much other stuff I commit myself to, making this the priority. Because we need
It
this.
makes sense that if we need to stretch the timing from June, you're stretching into summer where there's less other stuff coming at you. So you have, we could take the time then if we need to. But I think that for me, I think the only part that I want to make sure you know, in terms of the timing that will work is that defining, enough time to define the problem. That's the part I think we just have, you know.
And hearing you say that, it makes me think that for phase one, that phase one might need to go a little bit longer.
Uh-huh.
To
That's,
do just
that
that.
was my only consideration on looking at the timeline. I think having the public input, if I'm reading it right, starting like January thereabouts, is a good time of the year for that, sometime after the holidays.
You'll notice on page 3, or is the last bullet point for district actions on phase 2, it says building leadership teams using the draft plan to guide school improvement plans. And so that's an example of making sure we're operationalizing it. So we're gonna have some good ideas by next spring, and as those teams are getting together to do their building plans, we're gonna start to see that integration come to life. Knowing that, you know, each year we'll get a little bit better at that, but that would be my goal there. On enrollment, that one thing we're gonna need to talk about a little bit is kind of what are our expectations for enrollment, because there was just an article that I'll find it and share it with the board tomorrow on how enrollment's down everywhere. So like, what are we wanting to make sure that we're building metrics around the students who should be in the Mount Baker School District, and you know, reducing the number of students who opt out or choice out to other districts? Is it, you know, just how, because I want to make sure we're not creating goals that we can't meet.
I'm just thinking about what Danielle said, right? It's about the aim.
Mhm.
It's what we're aiming for. So we
Yeah.
want to aim to increase enrollment.
Okay.
If we fall short, we know we're aiming for the right thing and we're doing the right things, but
Mhm.
that's what we
Yeah,
should be
we're-
aiming for.
And we might be modest with that goal by researching it and saying, listen, birth rate's down nationwide, everybody around us is going on a trend downward, 3%, that's actually a pretty decent number, by the way. And so if we're trying to increase enrollment, it might be, instead of increasing by 4%, we might account for that downward trend as we're making our projection. But that doesn't mean that we should be happy with continuing loss, right? So that's something that we can talk about as we're setting those clearer metrics, right? It sounds like maybe we agree on the goal, but then how much,
Mhm.
right?
You could set it as a percentage of the district's school-age children. Because that changes over time. So if the demographics are such that, you know, countywide, the number of children are going down, nationwide, the number of children are going down, you account for that, but it's just, if there's 2,000 school-age children in the district and 1,500 are attending here, we're working with that, you know, increasing within that gap between the numbers who are, the total numbers here, to the extent we can figure that out. The total numbers here and the numbers that are participating in what program, I mean, it doesn't matter to me which of our programs they're doing, if they're doing ALE or if they're doing, you know, classroom experience. Students and their families are gonna figure out what's the best fit for what we offer, but we want to be doing the most we can to find things that work for all of our students.
That's why, yeah, the goal wouldn't necessarily be enrollment, but enrollment would be an indicator of us meeting the goals.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. No, I think that's right. But I really, you know, I brought up academics because I think that's an area that interacts with.
And it's something for sure somebody's gonna look at if they're thinking about where to enroll. It's easy data, it's just available. They're like, oh, how are these guys doing? And it's just there, right? So again, if it's not necessarily a strength of ours, we focus on the strengths, we build the enrollment, the weaknesses we minimize, and then those other middle areas, which might be the academic scores, that gives us time to incrementally improve those. So we're ahead of our competitors. the other schools.
No.
I think we do need to, in doing this overall evaluation and, you know, both looking backwards and defining the problem. I think it does help to recognize what some of our strengths are. So we're not always just focused on finding 3 or 4 areas of weakness, which we definitely need to do. But you've got to recognize, you know, like, for example, compared to most of our peers, I think for a school district our size, our co-curricular program is really quite strong. And we were stronger in terms of the percentage of participation prior to the pandemic than we have been since then. So that's another area that
Well, what I'll do, I'm gonna, you know, been taking notes through your whole discussion, and so what I'm gonna do is make a few revisions to this, and then we'll plan for, either our August 9th meet.
No, I guess, yeah, let's go back.
Pushing the timeline. Our October 9th meeting or the second, board meeting in October, I'll present that we'll work off of what will be the plan, and then we'll have our first, meeting where we start doing the work together. So we'll get started that way.
I'm excited for this work.
Yeah.
I think it, you know, and I've heard from staff that our previous process being sort of a ground up process where folks from all different areas got to come together and contribute their thoughts and ideas before things got too set in stone was a big part of the buy-in, of feeling like we built this, we want to use it. And I think tapping into that wide knowledge base, you know, the folks who are on the ground every day with our students, they've got insight that should be drawn in to the strategic plan.
And I think always seeking a wider range of parent voices too. You know, because I think, you know, we have, you know, it's a large district geographically and also socially. And so we need to make sure that we reach out all across the board to as many parents and other community members as we can, so that it is something, like you say, you've got a sense of ownership in, or at least your voice was heard in craft.
And I don't know how we do this, but it would be nice if what we create feels distinct to this community. This has our thumbprint on it. I don't know how you would recognize that when you saw it, but it's part of what makes us special.
I think that should show up in there.
I think once it's there and we see it reflected, we'll know.
Mm-hmm.
But saying out loud that that's something that we're trying to watch for means that it won't get forgotten. Yeah.
Another question here, Jessica. So you've used in putting this together, the strategic planning that you've done, like an Othello and I do think that looking at other districts' plans helps us broaden our thinking, and so having a spot in there pretty early on to look at other districts' plan. I mean, like, for example, Bellingham had the Bellingham Promise, which then, you know, they folded in their Ready for K program, they turned it into some pretty specific. Okay, every child's gonna have this opportunity, you know, so
That reminds me, I forgot to put it in there, the graduate profile. should be one of the outcomes of this as
Yeah,
well.
that was my idea earlier, that, what's a Mount Baker graduate look like, you know, you know, as an employer, you want someone, and, you know, who, I do too, and that has work ethic. You know, that they can think clearly, can do math, you know, you've got, so what are people going to think when they think, okay, that's a Mount Baker graduate? You know, I think I mentioned before that if a young person's from Kansas or Iowa, employers will look at them a little more than if they're from some other states. You know, it's just, where's the work ethic? And that's where, you know, to a great extent, that's where our co-curricular programs come in.
Yeah, that strength, thinking about our strengths.
Mhm.
You know, we're tightening our budget. We may continue to see decline in enrollment. So how do you provide a robust education in district with less? Right? I think looking at what we know how to do well is a piece of that.
Mhm.
You know, what do we do well and how do we maximize that?
I think the exciting thing is if we can figure that out, we'll do that much better when we are rewarded with increasing enrollment or.
And I do think it's helpful to look at what other districts do and what's possible and give us a wide sense of model. And I also think it's important for us to also say, here's what's possible here too, right? We might have our own constraints and our own, yeah.
So that gives you plenty to go on.
Yes. No, it's good work. I mean,
Yeah.
I find it fun. This will definitely be a challenge because again, this is something that, you know, sometimes someone's just full-time job
Mhm.
that will, maybe that'll kind of be the piece that really makes this Baker is that it's
Right.
gonna take a lot of people coming together to make this work.
Yeah, I think so.
And, you know, I think you are right that maybe some of this upfront is gonna take a little longer to get us to that point where we're.
But your job as a facilitating the process, right? I mean, the wealth of knowledge of the people that have been here, I mean, we have staff that have been here for so many years, that have a strong sense of who we are and what our students look like and need and what we've struggled with and what we can do, what we do well. I think spending that extra time on the front end, tapping into that and letting folks help define the shape of what comes out of this.
Yeah.
Right, that it won't be all on you to articulate it.
Yes, it'll be your guys' ideas for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And this plan, I think, is a really good framework to get it started.
Okay.
I do worry about the timing, like you said, that July to August 2026, with the implementation planning, you've given yourself like a month. And then also to be mindful, we were talking about stretching it out if we need to. Front loading the collaboration during the school year when all of your staff are here. That's really key, and having a backup plan that the people on the steering committee be willing to maybe come in the summer and be paid for their time or somehow to manage that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I mean, as you were talking, a thought that came to mind was if we get, you know, we realize we're gonna need more time. If we make sure that each school improvement plan next year gets built around some of the work that we get started. Maybe next year is like a test run where we're starting to put some of this stuff into action, but where the plan isn't completely finished yet, and we're going to use what we learned about the plan in that year So we're still working toward that target, but the target hasn't been formalized yet. And then. so
Try it, make one last revision.
Yeah.
Which is lovely, because when you start trying to actually measure some of those metrics, you can find out that that one really doesn't work.
I guess in the absence of a strategic plan incorporated into our ongoing operations, we'd be looking to continue on with your entry plan, right? So I don't know if it helps your workload at all though, because then you have to have that,
No, it doesn't.
that, right? Like,
But I think we could end this next year with those goal areas defined.
okay,
So that at least would, you know, we could start driving the work that way. We wouldn't need multiple plans to be working from.
We'd be in draft mode also. Right, we can take the loose draft of those bigger goals and set our calendar around those. And then the following year, we can hone that in and get more focused on it.
right.
Yeah,
Would actually really help, I think, drive some of the agendas that we have. So if we know, you know, let's say, hopefully teaching and learning continues to be a goal area, that we're using our meeting times to dive into, okay, so here are some of the outcomes that we're considering right now. Here's what we're thinking is working, here's what's not, and we get into that in these board meetings that helps each of you feel like you're moving the work along as well.
that makes sense.
Okay.
So we may not aim for it to be perfectly finished.
Mhm.
And there's so much to build out once you've got the shell of your strategic plan. So
Anything else on that? Well, thank you. Next up is the consent agenda. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And then, let's see, we have the superintendent informational items. I wanted to know, we don't have information from the audience, but I thought we should get that in there, that the attorney for the Little Lily timber sale appeal has notified the court that they are dropping the appeal. And so I really appreciate American Forest Resource Council for supporting us in that, and I think we had strong enough legal support at no cost to the school district that I think they realized it was a losing battle and not worth spending any more money on. So
Can you remind us of the financial benefit to the district?
what's that?
Can you remind us of the value?
Yeah, it's close to $500,000. This is Mount Baker's revenue from the Little Lily timber sale. And so that's the timing will still be, whatever Sierra Pacific decides as far as when the market is such that they want to harvest it. So that they have a certain
Right.
time window to work in, so that won't change, but at least kind of gets that kind of question mark of which way the court would rule. I always felt that we would win it, but
Right.
you don't know you've won it until you've won it. The formal acknowledgement of the dropping the appeal is still yet to come. But it's so that'll hopefully come pretty soon. But so go ahead with the superintendent informational items.
Well, I'm gonna start with the back to school report. And this is a report that I would like to start making a regular report to the board at the end of each September. And I also am hopeful that as we get going into our strategic planning process, this will start getting a lot more detailed and nuanced. So this is, in fact, I hope within a couple of years, I can look back at this one and go, oh my gosh, but we're doing so much better now. So just some areas that I think are important to highlight, child nutrition, we feed about 740 breakfasts each morning and 855 lunches. And Shannon Richardson and her team work really hard at providing quality food and that meets all of the requirements that they have from the federal government, which are very numerous, and also paying attention to all of the budgeting and the ordering and everything else that goes with that. And she had a few other notes there to add around how they, looking at additional revenues in terms of salads that are also sold. And then there's also a big process going on this year around community eligibility provision, which is what keeps our lunches free for all students. And so there's as families are getting information about returning these letters, just to kind of notifying us about family income and different things. I know that's kind of can be a sensitive topic for folks, but getting those turned back into the district really helps. And so I know our building secretaries are working hard at making sure those all get back in. For transportation, we have about 838 students. Suzanne Wooden she's like, oh, can you wait until Friday to give this report? Like,
Yeah,
she's got some updated reports that are coming. And I said, just give me a rough estimate right now. And so they have 24 routes. We have some of the longest and widest routes of any district in the state. And so she does a really good job of keeping our kids safe on those buses along with the bus transportation team. In a few moments, Gaetana will be answering any questions you might have about our September finance report. So I just linked that there. Won't get into that in this moment. But as you know, enrollment is something we're looking at really closely right now. And so I gave the board a heads up about that last week. We also made sure that staff were aware that we're about 30 students fewer than what we thought we were going to have this year for our budget. And so we're looking at that really carefully, but also trying to make sure that we're not being too alarmist right now, because we've got some good things going on as well, such as our fund balance is higher than it's been in a number of years. And so that gives us a little bit of security, but we have to look at this really carefully. It's not that we don't have money, we do have money, but we're having to make some really careful decisions about how we're spending the money to ensure that we don't dip into that fund balance. So I'm starting to have conversations with principals about, we're not freezing all spending right now, but we're definitely slowing it down so that we'll still spend money on the things that are absolutely essential, and we'll wait on things that can be, that we can wait on until we have a better picture of enrollment. In October is when we'll get some more firm numbers that will affect this year's budget. That statement there is just a reminder of how complicated counting enrollment is. You would think it's just, well, how many kids are in the building? It's not. We also need, there's other programs that draw down what the state gives us for actual apportionment for our students. This chart is a comparison of September of last year to September of this year by grade. One of the, other than what's happening with our secondary students, really it was our kinder students who didn't come in the way that we thought that they would. And that doesn't mean that it could just be that's just, there weren't that many kinders and we thought there would be more. Or it could be people choosing not to enroll in the district. So those are still questions that we're needing to spend some more time talking about. The other table there is comparing cohort to cohort. Mm-hmm. So for example, out of all of the kindergartners that we had last year, all of them came back for first grade except for 3. So, and then out of all of the second graders that we had last year, we actually have 3 more third graders this year. Steepest declines are definitely at the secondary level.
Have you had a chance to have a discussion on the 9th and the 11th?
Not yet. What we want to do is talk with the principals about asking the counselors to do some outreach and just start asking, calling folks that we know were in the district last year and just finding out, was this, are you doing online programs? Are you transferring to other school districts? Just trying not to badger people about what decisions that they might make that work best for their families, but just can we find out more about what happened with that decision? We do know that a lot of secondary folks, especially since COVID, like to find online opportunities and online schools. And so by our reaching out, it might be, hey, if that's working for you right now, great. If not, we're still here and the door's open. So please come back if and when you're ready.
Can we go back for just a second to the kindergarten numbers? So 5 years ago, 2020, it's 5-year-olds. So do we think that that drop in number is tied to maybe just people not wanting to have kids in 2020?
It could be, yeah.
I don't know if there's any bigger national data on that, but that might be interesting to help us know if this might be a 1 year or 2 year blip that we're seeing. People are like, oh, global pandemic, maybe I don't want to bring children to the world, or maybe that's not it at all. But if we could just check and see if there's any national level.
That article that I referenced a few minutes ago, I think, I didn't read the whole thing today, I just glanced at it, but I think that was kind of the.
I think those kids were born just before.
The pandemic. My math is.
It was,
But we could, it would be useful to see if there's birth rate data around that, to see if we're facing a few years of lower than even typical numbers.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything WAS has put out. Have you seen anything that OSPI or WAS has put out?
No, but I'll do some more digging.
the reason I say that is, we had a COVID baby and she's 2 years away from kindergarten, so.
Yeah, because that trend could play out for a few more years, if that's part of what is the factor there.
Yeah.
And that could be helpful for us in making our projection when we do budgeting.
Well, I think, the nationwide, we have a long-term decline in the birth rate too.
Yes.
It's not generally any individual state. It's, some states are growing, but most aren't.
I think the 6th grade number is more odd than anything else. That's 42 kids, right, in 6th grade?
Say it again?
The 6th grade kids, we went 146 and 24 to 104 and
No, that 6th grade, so way you look at it, is that 6th grade 144, 146, then becomes the 144 in 2025.
Yeah, so that's only dropped by 2 children.
okay.
Right, but the
Yeah,
If you
cohort-
follow that cohort
Yeah,
ahead.
okay.
I made that same.
Yeah,
when
see,
I was
like,
first
that's like-
looking at that.
Yeah,
I'm
so
like,
you-
what happened?
That's what's nice having the 2 colors, because you can get last year's cohort and
Yeah.
then see what it is this year.
Yeah.
So gray becomes red
Yeah.
this year.
And Jessica, if you don't have this off the top of your head, that's okay, but I didn't do the math to add everything up by grade. What is our total FTE enrollment right now?
It is, actually, did we? remember
I
if it was
have a
in here.
number I wrote in my notes, but I'm not sure if that's accurate.
Well,
No, I didn't put it in there. You have that number down? I want to say like 1447.
Seven is in my head.
Yeah,
but
1447.
I think that's our budget.
Oh. So we budgeted for 1447. but we're-
I think it's 1419 plus the ALD.
Thank you.
So yeah, I don't have a lot of answers for you yet, but we're just, I hope this shows we're looking at it and we're talking about it a lot, and we have some more digging to do.
so it says the number in the charts do not include ALE numbers. Did we add ALE enrollment this year?
I don't remember.
What do you mean, did we add?
Like,
Well,
did ALE increase, you mean?
did we increase the number of students participating in ALE? compared to last year?
I don't know if I have that comparison, but I can definitely do that.
ALE is alternative learning environment, or it's a homeschool program, where the district provides a lot of resources for the families, but the families, most of the education happens at home.
Yeah,
think
it's
that-
1447, including
It's
ALE.
what?
1447, and that includes ALE,
Okay.
and ALE is 27.5.
So 1447 is what we budgeted for and we
No,
included.
that's
No,
what
that's what we
is
have.
currently enrolled.
Okay,
At our next, in our October board meeting, once we have our October numbers, we'll have a more complete enrollment report for you.
If we're talking about positive things, we're like, oh, what did we do, or how did we add some students, right?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of silver lining there. And we want more blue,
Yes.
less red.
Okay, so moving on from enrollment, I've really appreciated seeing a lot of the emails that our principals have sent to staff around just reflecting on the start of the school year. I've heard some principals saying, it feels like the most normal, and I put normal in quotation marks because nothing's ever really normal in school, but it's been a smooth start overall. Certainly there's been bumps, we heard, from one parent at our last meeting about a significant bump, but those do happen, and we work to mitigate them as much as we can. But it's been good just hearing about the positive vibe that has been in the district so far this school year. As the board is aware that each school continues to implement their school improvement plans, and you're going to see our 3 elementary principals talk to you about that in a little bit more detail tomorrow. Those plans really are intended to be ongoing, and so you're going to see revisions and changes to those. In fact, I know Kendall Elementary made some changes just this week based off of student data that they were seeing, and so that's exactly what I'm asking our principals to do. So in terms of data, I'm wanting to be careful about how we present it because it can be interpreted in so many different ways. And I also want to make sure that we're looking at this in a way that leaves room for our schools to grow without feeling like we're using data as a weapon against them, because there's definitely work to do here. OSPI is changing how it is reporting a lot of the data. It used to be you were always looking for, when we took the math and the ELA and the science test online, that a level 3 and a level 4 is where we wanted students to be. And OSPI is saying that level 2s also indicate substantial foundational knowledge that's worth considering. And in fact, Superintendent Chris Reichdahl, a superintendent meeting last month, he was saying that the way that they're looking at that is looking at kids who get level 2s on these tests, the amount of those students who then go on and they're still successful in college, or they're still successful in the workforce. And so they're seeing evidence. I mean, they're still kind of working through that. I'm not, as the educational community, test scores are always really important. So when our leaders start changing the game on us a little bit, we're not really sure exactly what that means yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing more information from OSPI about that. What I'm sharing with you today is looking at a very, very high level. And I know that in coming years, and this is why I'm going to look back at this report in a couple of years and kind of chuckle, because it's going to be so much more detailed at grade level and information about, what groups of students are doing better than others and how we're addressing that. So for this high level, we're looking at grades 3 through 11, all grouped together. And so we're not breaking them out apart yet. But if we're gonna take this high level, we can see that in English language arts, or ELA, that the district improved last year to this year, ever so slightly, from 62.7% students in that levels 2, 3, and 4 range to 64.6%. And so we're still below the state average, but we're narrowing that gap. In math, there was also an increase from 50.3 to 52.9. But math is still where when I look at the data, math is really jumps out to me. We need to be doing a lot more with math. And then there was a decrease in science, which as a science teacher, that's a little disheartening, but we, as we strengthen ELA and math, that will benefit science as well. And on the flip side, when we're teaching science well, we're also teaching ELA and math. So they really go together. We just have to be intentional about that. The last graph that you'll see there is just that comparison between the state average to Mount Baker's for last year and this year in English language arts, math, and science. And so I kind of see this as our, at least for my work with the district, as a starting point, and the work forward with our strategic plan and our school improvement plans is to start making Mount Baker exceed what the state average is.
Yeah, once we get to the point where we're looking more grade level, then you can, that's what really interests me is to the extent we do value added over time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much what level a student starts. If you look at the level that a student starts when they come into the system, are they increasing over time, staying static, or going down? That's ideally we're showing that improvement over time, and then narrowing between demographics, where you I mean, for me, a goal, the goal is always not being able to just predict that a child starting with a certain demographic is going to stay there. That we, so that's, but some of the things that should, in my mind, end up in our plan as we delve into them further. So is the next step the budget?
Well,
you
no,
have
I
one?
just had two other items for superintendent informational items. Speaking to the Harkness's request around the property question, the board had asked me to look into that a little bit, and I did put together a recommendation. Won't ask the board to make any decisions on this tonight, but this was just as I've researched this and taken a closer look at it. These were my initial thoughts. I also did reach out to Tex Laddish at ESD 189 about this, and he agrees with my assessment of this recommendation. Being new to the district and new to the area, I didn't have a full understanding of actually where the property lines were. And so I know when I first talked with the family, I had thought, well, maybe that is a possibility. I didn't realize that it was, at least in the request as is right now, right up to the where our current buildings are there at Acme. So a couple of the concerns that I have about selling that particular parcel is, even though we're not in any place to be expanding or building new buildings right now, 20 years from now, we might be in a different situation, and that is something that we need to consider. We also need to be thinking about managing stormwater, parking, traffic flow, other infrastructure needs, and maintaining safety and security buffers around the school site. I looked at policy on this and for the school district, and so policy 6882, sale of real estate properties, says that the school board has the exclusive authority to dispose of district property if the property is no longer needed for school purposes. And so that was something that I was looking at a little bit more. I think that even though it's not being actively used, it does have the potential for use in the future. And if we sell this property now, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to acquire comparable property at a price that the district could afford. I also, broader application on this beyond just this particular situation, I think it's important for the board to consider. And so as we consider future requests like this, I would ask the board to consider educational use. How could the land be used for future building expansion or program needs? Operational use, does the property support infrastructure, parking, transportation flow, stormwater management, or safety and security? Growth trends, do enrollment or community trends suggest possible future needs? And then replacement cost, would selling the land now make future options not very reasonable for later on? So those were all the things that I was considering. And so my recommendation right now would be that we don't proceed with surplusing this land, but that is still something that I'll take direction from the board on, or maybe we need to entertain future, just more discussions about it. But that's where I'm at right now from the district perspective.
And I think from my perspective, if we sell land, it needs to be obvious to me that it's of no use to us. Like last year, we sold the Grange. It was a remote property, dilapidated building. Obviously not something that we were ever going to use. If there's a question, and this is just a general principle, if there is a question, for me, I'd need to see like an independent study from someone who's looked at it, determined that we're not going to need it for our future expansion. And I think, as a board representative, that's what I would need to say in case that's questioned, later on, because people do question land sales, as we know, right? Like it can come back. So we need to have an analysis of that.
Other questions, comments?
Well, I'll just say, I remember when we built the Kendall School. And property was next door to my grandparents' property, and they wanted to buy that property from the school. But we had a tremendous amount of growth in the Kendall Maple Falls area during that time, and the need for the school was great. That we've seen a significant decline in that particular community, and so when we walk into Kendall now, there are spaces that seem unused, but we can't predict where a population growth might happen 20 years from now. Just like 20 years ago, we might not have predicted that this booming part of our district might over time not have that same need. Because the property is directly connected to the school grounds, that makes me more hesitant to sell, because the opportunity to have that property again might not ever happen. So I hesitate to make a sale of property. We heard from folks when we sold the Grange last year that they were angry that we would even consider selling property in an undesirable location on the edge of the boundary of the school district that had safety issues adjacent to it. I mean, that property was much clearer in my mind, that it had no clear use. This is less clear to me.
Yeah, the Grange was located so that we would never site a school there.
It was also it was a liability.
In the time, in the 25 years I've been on the board, the only properties we've surplused are ones that, like the Grange, that are, or little parcel. We did sell the the parcel where the North Fork Library is across the road, from Kendall School. If it had been on the other side of the road, we wouldn't have sold it, but we couldn't use it for school property because we had a busy highway in between the two parcels. And the, you know, the library did work out those two, but I've oftentimes reflected on, so that most of this campus here was a donation from the Mitchell family. And then the additional part east of Mitchell Road was acquired for, Mitchell sold it for $4,000 to the district when we needed to expand. And that was just the cost of moving their house across the highway. But in the time I've been on the board, we purchased all of our property except for one little parcel we owned before I was on the board on the west side of westerly side of Mitchell Road. And we've spent at least $1 million on that, on those parcels, on that, purchasing those, where we have the soccer field now and the Educational Resource Center. And I've oftentimes thought if the school board in 1947 had foreseen that we would need additional land, they probably could have acquired everything we spent $1 million on for $1,000. But they were being, I thought, penny wise and pound foolish to not see this campus and say, hey, that's not quite big enough for future needs. So, and then also if we ever, if we added on another, like a 4 classroom thing like we did, it's just before I was on the board, we did the 4 classroom thing at Acme. That would take additional land, of which we don't have anything else on that campus where we can do that. So I think it does, it doesn't make sense to dispose of something that's contiguous and buildable. So thank you for researching this. I think you did a thorough job of looking at it. And I'm unfortunate about it, but we have to look at the long-term needs.
I came here looking
Yeah.
for information. and
No,
think I've got it.
Yeah, we're not, I don't want to get into
And
discussion.
it's
about
not personal.
Yeah, no, I know.
I know I'm speaking out of turn here, but
Yeah,
it was really interesting to hear.
but thank you, thanks for presenting it and thinking about it.
I was thinking on a whole different level of that,
Yeah,
so
so,
I get it.
and we appreciate your longstanding support for the school district.
I think we do, and we will.
So thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
In the interest of time, I'm not gonna spend any time on this, but in my last board update, I had given you some information about Othello's process for student reps. If, what I'd like to know is just if that's if that in general sounds acceptable to the board, and I can then modify that to make it kind of more of a Mount Baker process. My next step then would be to present that to our high school principal and have him put out the call to students saying who's interested in being on the board.
I did have a couple of questions that I could use some clarity on that might also be helpful before we send out a call for students. What role do students play on the board? They're not voting, but let's say we're in executive session with an employee issue.
If
They're not
student
in
is
executive
not-
session.
A part of that.
No.
I think we'd want to make that clear because I don't know that we've had a student sit on the board in recent years. And make that clear for students and for our staff. Just so that everybody knows what those expectations are on the front end, that nobody's going to be put in an awkward position.
Almost like create a job description for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have had student reps while I've been on the board a number of years ago. And when it worked well was when students were engaged and attended, almost or every school board meeting. And I think we've got an enthusiastic bunch of students to pick from now, so I think we can get that going. So what the student rep does is, so if we're having a discussion on any given subject and particularly, academic or curricular or any of those kind of things that pertain to their work, they're an equal member of the board discussion. So what they don't vote and they do not participate, they don't attend executive session, but they are generally attend our legislative conference and WASDA annual meeting. It's pretty common that student representatives from other school districts attend there, and they have both, meet with the rest of school directors and then have their own student rep meetings. But I think we found last year, I felt that they were extremely effective in legislative advocacy. And I think, the legislature funded our district about an extra, over $900,000. And I think tipping that balance, certainly the student's voice really helped with getting the legislators to think that way. So that's been, and it's also, it's a great opportunity for students that wish to go on into, public service or community engagement to learn it at this level. And I found it was really useful for the board to kind of get our heads out of the clouds and into what their day-to-day life is.
Well, it's not gonna be very hard because there's rumor of it happening, there's going around, and there's a lot of people who seem to want to be involved in it, so I think it's gonna be a good thing.
You guys are gonna have to have the hard decision of like interviewing a bunch of students, only
Yeah.
picking one or two.
Yeah, last time we had the high school, I think the principal and the counselors decided and assigned them, which is easier for the board, but I think it's a good process for us to, if we get, more than two applicants, ideally you want to have a senior and an underclass person. So that you've got someone who's who's learning and then can be the older one, one the following year. So you don't want to have two seniors and then have to start again the following year.
Yeah.
And so it's, for the younger one, it's a 2-year.
So are they both honorary members of the board, or is only the senior and then the next one's kind of the?
No, they're
training.
both co-equal.
They're co-equal. Okay.
Student reps, yeah.
And they would come to like, the site visits that's happening tomorrow, if it works with their class schedule, they'd
Right.
be invited to come to those things.
Okay.
They'll be able to give the board some really good perspective.
I think to be a great opportunity for the board and for our students.
Yeah.
And even with the interview process, if we've got more students than spots, we have 2 spots we're considering, is that?
Some boards have as many as 3.
Okay.
but
I like the idea too, you have a senior and an underclassman,
Yeah.
and then that moves up and
Yeah.
a new one comes in, I think it's.
And it'd be a great opportunity for them to come and interview with the board.
Yeah.
That's a great learning opportunity too.
Okay, well, I'll work on that and get you guys a final draft.
So you've met with the class, with the ASB class, but this will be open across the board, not
Yeah.
just limited to the ASB
Yeah.
class.
Any high school student can apply.
And I think that's good, although I think, you know, that ASB class it's really been a powerhouse.
As a board, we might want to think about how we help onboard our student board members.
Are you volunteering?
I'm happy to help. I'm
You
happy to
suggest
help with
something,
that.
you volunteer for it too.
She
Well,
complains volunteering.
Yeah.
WASDA has resources for that.
Okay.
My friend Logan has been staff member there for student reps. When he worked for WASDA previously, now he's back at WASDA again. And, so he's got a lot of good background in that.
Okay, now I'm finally done.
What's that?
I said, now I'm finally done talking.
Okay, now we're ready for final.
Yes.
Like, okay, so Jessica touched base on enrollment already. As you've heard, we are down about 30 students in September compared to what we budgeted for. General fund, we are looking at August, so we are at 100% of the fiscal year. General revenues are about 34,170,385, and that represents about 98% of what we had estimated. Our general fund expenditures are 33,409 and represents about 98% of our budgeted expenses. General fund balance is a whopping 1.7, so we are cautiously optimistic about retaining that number October, November. August cash.
I had a question about the 30 students, so if that, we end up 30 less than what we thought. Would you expect that number is in the range of what could be handled through just, normal yearly attrition in terms of balancing the budget for?
It would be about $350,000 is what those students represent. And so, I mean, we could absorb that through taking out of the fund balance if we needed to. We don't want to do that, so we're gonna look for other cost saving measures.
Right.
Yeah, it's just very challenging to get reach that kind of cost savings within the budget year. Because you very limited opportunities to reduce staff.
And we did budget conservatively as it was. Brian did, so.
I guess the question would be, there is some attrition. You rehired versus reorganizing to accommodate that.
Like at the end of the school year?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that'll be a part of our staffing conversations, but that's also why we're looking at creating some staffing tools to help us get a better picture of where we have people and, maybe it's not adding more people, it's just using their current people differently.
Let's scroll down a little bit. Other funds and cash investment balances. There hasn't been a significant activity or any significant activity to capital projects. Still at 2.1 million. Debt service fund hasn't changed. Associated student body has increased a little bit, and that was due to purchase orders being closed and encumbrances essentially being closed out with those POs, and less anticipated expenditures occurred. So they're going to end with a fund balance a little bit higher than what they expected as well. And then there's been no significant change in our transportation vehicle fund. As far as binding conditions go, we are continuing to meet our deadlines, communicating with ESD almost daily And we did have a brief meeting with OSBI last, well, I guess was this month, at the end of August.
Yeah, it was the last day. of
Yeah, it
August,
was
so
just
that's
a
what it
few-
feels. Yeah.
Very short meeting, and they are satisfied with our progress and encouraged us to stay on the path that we are currently on. We have a scheduled meeting on November 17th. Meet again. And I just wanted to touch on enrollment as well. Like I said, we are cautiously optimistic about our fund balance, so hopefully that will help as far as enrollment is concerned. And we are just continuing to focus on academic progress and student wellness and community engagement, which you all spoke to regarding the strategic plan. And I think it's important to put some of that focus into finance as well. And, you know, we're trying to continue community engagement to help build trust in our community, which I think drives new families to come and hopefully retain the ones that are here. And in the long run, you know, help continue that financial growth that we're looking for as well. And that's a good picture of our ending fund balance right there. But we also had a lot of revenue coming in August through apportionment since July was short, so part of that increase. Just another comparison report.
Was that,
Questions?
yeah, any questions?
Can you remind me, one of you remind me, our board policy for the fund balance, it's 5% of not our budgeted expenses, but our actual expenses,
The previous year.
the previous year's actual expenses. So where we're at right now, how close are we to having sort of a year-end final expenditure number for 24-25?
I won't close out the year until the end of October, so not until November. I won't.
Okay, so we'll know that in November.
Yeah.
Okay,
And that's why if we do exit binding conditions next year, it won't be until November when all the numbers are final.
but can we go back to that earlier slide that shows our fund balance? I mean, I guess that one shows in comparison, but the very beginning slide. That one.
Or do you want to look at the budget status?
So our general fund expenditures, I mean, and then our general fund balance. How representative of those are those numbers of our 5% target? Does that question make sense? If I divide those expenditures into that fund balance, it gets us at about 5%. But what am I not accounting for there? Does that make sense? I
Well,
don't. mean to put you on the
5%,
spot.
let's say the expenditures ended up being 33.4. You're saying that's not finalized, but
Correct.
that's
No,
what it
but
is.
let's say if it were.
If it was 5% of that, that would be 1.67 million, about
Yeah.
1.7, which is
What we're at.
what we're at.
I mean, that's a celebration then, in a sense,
It's a
not
big
just that not just that it's a bigger number than we've had in recent years, but that's really on target for board policy earlier than we thought we would be.
It is.
Yeah, it's. If we would have been able to keep it with the enrollment, it would have put us, I would say, a year or more ahead. In what, in my mind, in terms of building fund balance.
Yeah.
You know, I think ultimately I'd like to build fund balance above the 5%. But we've got to achieve the 4% to exit binding conditions and then stabilize the 5% before we're able to.
Yeah.
To chart our way forward from there.
Well, I just wanted to call that out as a positive.
Sure, yeah.
Which is why we're not looking at this enrollment decline as an opportunity to take money out of that.
Right.
If we can help it at all. So that's the work ahead of us right now.
We need that to build that fund balance.
Yeah.
Continue building.
Yeah, and board policy, keeping us above that 5%. It's funny, you know, it looks like such a big number, but when you look at
It's not.
any given month, what our expenditures
2
are,
weeks.
right? And how our apportionment doesn't come in evenly throughout the year. We've got to have a solid fund balance to be able to cover those months when we don't get enough apportionment. And so I think it's important, I think, to just keep banging that drum, because that looks like a lot of money.
The other per student loss has a year delay. That's the amount that we can collect for our educational programs levy is based on the previous year's student numbers. So we can collect approximately $3,000 per student based on the previous year. So if you're down 30 students the whole year, then the following year you collect about 90,000 less from property tax. So it doesn't, it's designed so it doesn't impact
Well,
a current year's budget midstream, which I'm glad about, because the state payments do. And that's a kind of a bone, you know, I think WASDS would like to change that and base the state payments on the previous year too, but because you make your budget year to year and you have no ability to change things to any great extent within a budget year. Well, thank you. That's very, very, very good, thorough report.
and it reflects a lot of really hard work on difficult decisions over the last few years.
And I appreciate your close cooperation with ESD as you both are getting into this new role for each of you. I think having.
We ask for help frequently.
Yeah, having it, you know, I think it gives a great degree of surety to have that close cooperation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So then we're up to meeting schedule. I think just to mention that our next regular meeting is October 9th. And we will, we'll have to decide. I think our normal schedule would put the October 23rd as our board discussion.
Okay.
That gives you most of the month to get that stuff ready there. And as Jessica mentioned, tomorrow the FFA salmon dinner is 5 p.m. Before the football games. We have our elementary site visits tomorrow morning. We're meeting at 8 a.m. and a meeting here. So we meet at the district office here tomorrow at 8 a.m.
Just a reminder, I will not be able to attend that.
Okay.
It's my student's second day.
Yeah, it's totally okay.
And Brenna said she should be able to attend. You're able to come and I'll be there. And what time did we decide we were going to be done?
I think, I can't, let me say, I don't know. if I
8 to
got
12,
that.
I thought.
It's aiming for noon, I think.
Yeah.
It's scheduled until noon, but I think, I had built in about 20 minutes of extra debrief time by the time we get back to the district office, but we're traveling together in the car, so
Yeah,
we can speed up some of that debrief, and so probably be done around 11:30, 11.
okay, now that's good. I'm meeting with the state land commissioner at 2:30 and online and I wanted to
We'll get you done.
trying to convince him what's wrong with setting aside 77,000 acres from older forest. It's an uphill battle, but it's gotta know the impact on schools. Okay,
Are any of our principals planning on sharing slides or presentation?
I don't think so. I was pretty clear with them. I don't want a big production.
Okay.
This is just come and see the work as is right now. So no, don't do anything special, just,
And I won't ask for anything to be sent.
I do have kind of like a little handout that I was planning to give the board tomorrow morning. I'll email that to you so you have it. Yeah.
Take notes for me, Ed.
Oh,
It won't be anywhere near what you would have been. So I was gonna say, do my best.
yeah, it's good. So we don't have an executive session, so that's the end of our agenda, so adjourn. Thank you very much and stay around to sign papers.
Thank you, guys.
Darn, so early.
Appreciate your time and the considerations.